Yes, welcome into Sports Bit Betting Insight today, Monday, May 2nd. Pauly and Teddy on SBRpicks.com. Big game breakdown's going to be the two big ones in the NBA playoffs. Cubbies and the Pirates go at it for the first time. Deep dive, we recap the NFL draft, and of course, the play of the day. Bad beats. The Raptors exercise the demons. They win a playoff series for the first time since 2001, but the point spread hijinks. Teddy, they're up 16 with 7 minutes left. In a 17-4 run by the Pacers. Had to sweat that out, and if you laid the points, you lost. Tough one.
Yeah, and you could have laid 5.5 with Toronto. Got a bet up to 6 by tip-off. They end up winning the game by 5, but of course, you're up 16 with 7 and change to play. You're expecting to cover that number, and of course, they're up 3, less than a minute to play. This is your key point spread possession. They run 23 seconds off the shot clock for DeRozan to jack up a bad 3. So, the Raptors finally did win a series. That being said, the Pacers ended up covering the last 4 games of that series and 5 of the 7 overall. And to be perfectly honest, that was not the kind of basketball worth celebrating. Toronto's big 2, Lowry and DeRozan, finish under 33% from the floor again in Game 7. Under 33% from the floor in the series. Obviously, if they play like that against Miami, it's going to be a short series for Toronto.
Paul George ripped the officials after the game, and they felt they got screwed. They shot 8 free throws the entire game, and 2 questionable calls went against the Pacers down the stretch. But I did agree with what he said. He goes, hey, it's Game 7 on the road. That's what happens. He's right about that. Home team get the call.
Yeah, and that being said, 8 free throws. Toronto, Indiana was the more aggressive team, certainly down the stretch of the fourth quarter. I don't blame George for being upset about the officiating, but if we gave a medal for every guy that complained about the officiating after his team lost, hell, Paul, we'd all have one.
First round recap: favorites 35-11 straight up, and the unders 31-15. Now we're on to round 2. More bad beats. The Blazers. The NBA really got them with the start time here. The late Friday night game when they finished off the Clippers. They got to come back Saturday afternoon at 12:30 Pacific. There was no reason to start that series that early.
No, the NBA is the only professional league that impacts the integrity of its own playoff games by giving one team an added advantage for no reason.
Well said.
Why doesn't Atlanta Cleveland open on Sunday and then Portland Golden State on Monday? But the answer is TV ratings, obviously, and the TV networks determine everything. But instead of celebrating on Friday night, Terry Stotts pretty somber about what was coming next. Quote, with a 12:30 game, it's going to be pretty simple basketball, pretty simple preparation. As the series goes along, both teams will make adjustments, but they've had some time to think about us. It's going to be a challenge, obviously, but we'll watch a lot of video tonight and tomorrow and have a meeting tomorrow and be ready to tip it up on Sunday. So, of course, Game 2 is on Tuesday. When's Game 3?
Saturday.
Not until Saturday. So,
absurd.
Portland doesn't get a single practice in between round 1 and round 2. I don't blame Terry Stotts for being upset.
Yeah, and they came out flat and they were down 20 before you knew it. Curry said he could play Game 3 Saturday. Would you play him?
Absolutely, I'd play him. Get him back onto the even if it's only a few minutes.
Okay.
Get him back onto the floor, get him into the rotation. They will need Steph Curry to survive and advance and win this title. But of course, when it's a small market team like Portland on the road against a team they absolutely want to advance to the next round, maybe you don't worry about rushing Curry back too much.
Yeah. One more. Cubs Braves under 6.5. 3-0, bottom of the 8th. And then 3-1 in the 9th. The Cubs rally to tie it. Braves win 4-3 in extras. Tough one if you had the under there.
Yeah, sure is. Of course, you're going to have tough beats when you're betting under 6.5. That's just the nature of the game. Rob Vino, who was on this show as a guest a few weeks ago, had a great line back in the day. He goes, teams can get to 3 runs by accident. And it happens in baseball. The 3-3, obviously. You're under 6.5 was dead. Bad news for Chicago. But the Cubs losing to Atlanta as $2 chalk.
The bad bets. How about Charlotte? Miami runs them out in Game 7.
Yeah, and to be honest, this wasn't as bad as Oklahoma City at San Antonio on Saturday. But that being said, Oklahoma City and San Antonio on Saturday felt over from the first minute of the game. For 5 minutes in, that game was over. Charlotte, maybe it took like a quarter for them to be beat against Miami, but it felt over very, very early. if you bet the Hornets, you did not have a right side.
They were Orioles. They were betting against Sale, who's now 6-0.
Yeah, they bet the crap out of it. I mean, the Orioles opened plus 130. They closed to pick them, minus 110, minus 105, right in that range. So a ton of Baltimore money. Sale throws a gem. The Chi Sox bullpen behind him is slamming the door shut every single game. Meanwhile, Jimenez couldn't get out of the fifth. White Sox with the blowout win. That's a bad bet for all of that Baltimore money.
In a month into the season, how about some bad contracts? Two pitchers we need to discuss.
Sure. It's not just bad beats and bad bets. We got bad contracts to open the show today. Here's Mike Pelfrey. 2 years, $16 million. Let's see, he's 0-4 with a 5.68, but he did get bailed out of another L on Sunday because he left down 3 runs, and the Tigers' offense got going after he left. But that Pelfrey sighting for Detroit looks disastrous. I mean, $16 million is not going to break the bank for the Tigers, but this is a guy they were counting on to hold down a spot in the starting rotation, and so far he hasn't even been serviceable. Mike Pelfrey, a bet against all the way.
And a game that hurt our feelings Friday night, our play of the day, the Yankees bullpen blew it. This Yankee team stinks.
they do. Of course, the Yankees, this is the first time since 1984 that the Yankees are dead last in Major League Baseball in runs scored entering the month of May, via Elias Sports. And of course, they did see their offense get on track on Fenway on Sunday Night Baseball, but of course, they were going against David Price, who's been lit up 3 times in 4 starts at Fenway. And, of course, Eovaldi and the Yankees pen behind him couldn't hold anything in that contest. Yankees get 7, still lose that game. But there's another bad contract I want to talk about. We got to talk about Shelby Miller.
Oh, sorry, yes.
And it's only, again, 1 year, $4.4 million. Arizona paid a big price to bring him over from Atlanta. So far, Miller, who was the advanced metrics stud last year, let's see, 0-3 with an 8.49. I think the D-backs may already want to be pointing Shelby Miller somewhere else after that kind of a start.
And this will be a bad bet, and if you pay for this, you can tattoo sucker on your forehead. Mayweather hinted he's going to come out of retirement. They're going to go Mayweather-Pacquiao too, and I couldn't believe all the people after the first one. Boy, I can't believe how boring it was. What'd you think was going to happen? That's every Mayweather fight. So dominant, boring, Mayweather by decision. If you pay $60, $70 again for that thing, because you know the outcome, and you know what's going to happen, it's going to be a pillow fight again. So they'll make it happen, and shame on you if you order that on pay-per-view whenever they decide to do it.
That being said, Paul, you going to watch that fight? I know you will.
No
That's
chance.
what we do, man.
No
That's what
chance.
we do. The fight might stink. You know it's going to stink. I'm not going to pay for it, but I'll be in a casino or in a sports bar or with some buddies watching it for sure. It's,
I refuse to pay for Mayweather fights. I refuse.
I don't blame you.
All right, big game breakdown coming up next. 2 huge games in the NBA playoffs on SportsBit. Betting Insight today. All right, time for big game breakdown. Live odds at sportsbookreview.com. The early game, Hawks and the Cavs. Game 1, Cleveland 7.5. 200.5 the total. Series price $6 for the Cavs. And we've been talking about it the last month on this show. The Atlanta defense, if you look at this graphic, post All-Star break, 96.8 points per 100 possessions. Number 1 in the league against Boston, 91.3 points per 100 possessions. In the Boston series, Teddy, they were guarding plays. Now can they guard players?
And that's such a subtle difference, but it's so true. The Celtics, they're not a one-on-one team. Brad Stevens is a guy that designs good plays, and Boston ran good plays, and Atlanta did a very good job of defending those plays. Now, it's not about plays. It's about players. And if you look over the second half of the campaign, we've talked about how good this Cavaliers defense has, or the Hawks defense has been, but the 2 matchups with Cleveland might have been their 2 weakest defensive performances of the entire second half. Certainly rested, as bad as it was defensively. Cleveland, they were plus 2.5 at Atlanta. They score 110 and win in overtime. Cavs laying 6.5 at home. They score 109 in that ball game, scoring 104.2 points per possession in those contests. And LeBron was the key in both of those games. 63 points on 25 of 42 from the floor, Paul.
And he owned them last year in the playoffs when he went for 30, 11, and 9. 7-0 straight up in the last 7. 6-1 ATS. And you look at the scores, you look at this graphic from last year's playoffs, 97-89, thumped them by 12 in Game 2. The overtime win, 114-111 in Game 3, and then they ran them out in Game 4. Although I have to point out, Corver was hurt. Horford got suspended for his hit on Dellavedova. Carroll got hurt, and Cephalosha was out of the series, courtesy of the NYPD. So, although they look like they've owned this, they have owned them lately, but, competitive games so far. But last year, kind of hard to say the same thing will happen when they had 3 key injuries and a big suspension in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Of course, Cleveland a different team than they were last year at this time as
That's
well.
true.
They have a healthy,
That's fair.
Kevin Love, and they have, Irving, even though he got really hurt in Game 1 or Game 2 of the finals? Was it Game 1 of the finals, I believe it was. But, he was banged up throughout the postseason. He's not banged up now. So what I like to do in these situations, Paul, I want to read everything that I can find about what the players are saying defensively. Here's Atlanta, who's been great defensively against everyone, and they've struggled against Cleveland. So let's start with Kent Bazemore. He opens up just on LeBron James, saying, quote, "You can't go in humble. You have to make yourself angry. You have to," which you're pretty good at, Paul. "You have to do whatever it takes to accept that challenge because he's a freight train. He brings it. He comes with everything he has. You have to do the same thing to hang in there." And that's, in my mind, a pretty good philosophy for Kent Bazemore in this series.
Okay. And Horford's going to have to play well if Atlanta has a shot. What did he say?
Well, Horford says it's going to take a team effort. Quote, "When you talk about LeBron, you don't talk about one player guarding him and leaving him on an island. He's the kind of player that demands a whole team pays attention to you. All of us have to be really active and make sure he works for everything he gets." Again, makes sense. Horford's talking the talk. He's not the only one talking about it, though.
All right, one more. How about Corver?
Yeah, of course. We got to talk Kyle Korver, the heartthrob. And he's saying basically that team defense isn't going to be easy with Cleveland's weapons. Quote, "That's what we tried to do in the series last year, and he just found every shooter." He, of course, being LeBron. "They three-pointed us to death. It's a totally different scenario. He and Kyrie are both going to have their ball in their hands a lot. They are both great in one-on-one situations. They are both great in pick and roll. We have to give them the proper respect that they deserve, but they have a ton of great shooting. Atlanta's going to have their work cut out for them in this series, but if the Hawks are going to win or make it even a competitive series, it has to be done on the defensive end. They're going to have to find some answers against the Cavs that they weren't able to find in the postseason last year or in any of the regular season meetings so far this season.
Okay, very good. Game 2, Thunder and Spurs. A blowout in Game 1. Game 2, San Antonio 7.5, 202.5. The total, the adjusted series price, now $9. Spurs 43-1 at home on the season. The last team to lose Game 1 in the playoffs by 30 points or more and win the series, the Lakers in 85 of the finals against the Celtics. Westbrook, a bit of a surprise. Pop put Leonard on Westbrook, who went 5 of 19, really struggled, missed some bunnies, some layups. How about this? He wouldn't give Leonard any credit after the game.
No, he sure wouldn't. But I got to ask you about this, Paul, because really, the last team to lose a Game 1 by 30 or more and win a series, the 1985 Lakers. Does that make that minus $9 look cheap to you? I mean, is there a scenario?
Yeah.
I know that coming into this series, I was all about OKC's got it. Man, I watched Game 1, and it looked like not just the game was over, the series was over in the first quarter of Game 1. What's Donovan going to do? I mean, here's Kawhi Leonard. He's locking in on Westbrook. What a brilliant move. And you're right, Westbrook wouldn't give him any props, I asked, what did Kawhi do to bother him? Quote, "Nothing really. A lot of the shots I missed to the basket against the bigs. I was able to get to my spots, and I just missed some layups. They do a good job of helping. Most of the time, it's the help side defender. Me, personally, I never look at the guy in front of me to see what the next move is. But, of course, the great players just miss layups. Is this series a test of the Westbrook mentality? His last 2 games against San Antonio, he's 10 of 35 from the floor."
I thought Chris Webber said it was the worst pick and roll defense he's ever seen. And he might be right. They're not a smart team. Number one, they play hero ball on offense. And number two, they fouled a 3-point shooter 4 times in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that game was over 4 minutes in.
Yes, I agree with you.
Did you see the play? Westbrook was looking over to the bench for timeout. Donovan didn't call one. So, boom, turnover, fast break bucket. I think it was 19-6 at that point. And it felt over. Unless you want to say it was over when Kawhi dunked on the opening play, because that was the beginning of that pick and roll defense disaster. And you talked about, what is it, four different three-point shooters got fouled in the first half. It's also worth noting, and by the way, that was 10 extra points for San Antonio off of those free throw shots, or 10 extra free throw shots from those opportunities that they're not supposed to get. One of them, Danny Green's, went in. But the other thing that happened, Pops is playing for real now. And we saw something they didn't do at all against Memphis. They didn't push against Memphis. They didn't need to. Now, against OKC, they averaged just 10.5 points on the fast break in the regular season. That was fourth worst in the NBA. They had 15 at halftime on Saturday. They ended up outscoring OKC 18-12 on the break. And, of course, no answers whatsoever for OKC on the LaMarcus Aldridge front.
Jesus, 18-23, 38 points in 29 minutes. And you look at, the old guys like that too. Because you look at this graphic, Aldridge, what he did, and then the old guard, Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, 16 points. And they got a lot of rest with his huge, again, 5 easy wins. And after the game tonight, they get that long break because they're going to need it. Because then after that, every game, all the series are every other day. So, again, it's another blowout win. He gets to sit everybody.
Yeah, I think it matters big time that they won another playoff game without anybody playing for a full 30 minutes. Aldridge got his 38 in 29-32. Only 34 of the 124 Spurs points were scored by players over the age of 30. We think of San Antonio as his old team, but again, it's not just a problem with Aldridge. OKC didn't guard anyone. You'd expect when they watch some film, they might be embarrassed about that defensive showing. I'm not convinced they're going to have a whole lot of options to correct what went wrong in game number 1.
Well, Major League Baseball, one more. And again, live odds at sportsbookreview.com. Cubbies and the Pirates, their first meeting, first of 19 meetings, and the first since the Arrieta and the Cubs shut out Cole in the wild card game. Hamill against Cole. Cole $1.10, 7 the total. Again, what do odds makers do with the Cubs here? It's going to be a freight train all season.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch the betting markets deal with the Chicago Cubs because every square bettor in the world loves the Cubs. And frankly, I don't blame them. And every recreational player, I think that's a more appropriate word, likes Cubs. And the Cubs are the best team in baseball. You're supposed to like the Cubs. But what's happening is that there are groups of wise guys, syndicates, who've been looking to bet against Chicago. They say this team's an overvalued commodity. They're laying $2 when they should be laying $1.60. They're laying $3 when they should be laying $2.50. They're saying there's value on the dogs in Cubs games. So when you have books that cater to recreational players, are getting just a deluge of Chicago money. When you have books that are catering to wise guys, they're getting a ton of money the other way. So it's fascinating to see this battle on a daily basis with the Chicago Cubs because, again, this team has been a big favorite versus a weak teams on a pretty consistent basis over the first month of the season. But now they're stepping up against an opponent with an ace on the hill and in playoff revenge, Pauly.
Yeah, how about the Cubs on the road? This is staggering. Last year and the start they're off to this year.
Yeah, last year, the best road team in Major League Baseball. 48 wins on the highway. So far this season, the best road team in baseball. They're 10-3 on the highway. They outscored their opponents by 55 runs. That run differential, obviously something that the betting markets pay a ton of attention to. And, of course, this is the first chance for Cole and the Pirates to get a crack at the Cubs after Arrieta blanked them. Was it 4-0 in the wild card game last October? But that was played on this field. And guess what? Cubs got the job done. And what do you say about Jason Hamill right now? The last thing anyone wanted to see in the NL Central is see Jason Hamill starting to mow batters down. You seen his numbers so far this year?
Yeah, come on. When you got Arrieta, Lester, and then Lackey, and now what this guy's able to do at the back end of the rotation, run those numbers down.
Yeah, 3-0 with a 0.75 ERA. All the advanced metric numbers are good except for one. And the one is something of concern. Jason Hamill, 3.5 walks per 9 inning. That's his highest count since 2011. But every other stat that he's had has been lights out. And, of course, the Cubs bullpen behind him. They've stayed fresh, they've stayed rested, and they've been real good so far this season. We'll talk about that bullpen a little bit more when it comes to Play of the Day time.
Play of the Day up next, and we'll go rapid fire and recap the NFL Draft on SportsBit. Betting insight today at sbrpicks.com. Time for the deep dive on SportsBit. We promised you football every day. We're going to deliver. win totals, team previews, conference breakdowns, games of the year, all that coming up. But first, we recap the NFL draft. Teddy, did anything happen over the weekend that would change win totals, odds on week one, so anything like that?
Not one thing. And that's the thing that pundits have to recognize about the NFL draft. Not one week's 1 point spread was affected, let alone week 2, week 7, week 14. Not 1 point spread. Not one season win total is going to move. Not a nickel. The juice on it's not going to move. Nothing. Not one future book odds, not to win the division, not to win the conference, not to win the Super Bowl, has changed due to the draft. So everyone in the world can give everyone an A or an F or a C or whatever you want to give them. Did you see? I was reading on ESPN. I think it was every single team's first round pick got an A from their beat writer.
It's just stupid.
On the ESPN analysis.
Yeah,
Everybody's getting.
I saw Mel Kiper up there Friday and Saturday with his grades. Give me a break.
Yeah. But they need to put out content, Paul. That's their job. Every day they have to put out content and put out content. We're going to put out content on this show all freaking summer long when it comes to football, because I know, look, there's only so much you could talk about baseball. There's only so much you could talk about basketball. I know that football drives the U.S. or the North American betting market like nothing else, and there's enough football to talk about all summer long. There really is, and I'm looking forward to it to make sure that you and I get our work done early, and we're going to have quality analysis on this show. These guys, they got to kick out columns. They got to kick out a column today, and we got another one at 9 o'clock tonight, and you got another one at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Knock yourself out, McShay. Knock yourself out, Kuiper. You're not getting paid for being right or wrong. You're just getting paid for pushing out content. It's what they do.
One NFL GM called it the worst pick in NFL draft history. The Buccaneers gave up a third and a fourth round pick to move up in the second and take Aguayo, the kicker out of Florida State, the most accurate kicker in college football history. He thinks he'll be able to, pooch kick and pin teams with the new rules now. And, I don't know. They lost a lot of close games and a lot of kicking issues. Do you have a problem with the pick?
I have a problem with how much they paid to get it.
Okay.
When you're giving up a third and a fourth rounder to move up and draft a kicker, it's a little bit dicey. That being said, will this help their football team? Yes, it will. And I don't have an issue with a kicker. Look at Seabass. He was the last kicker to go high. Janikowski for Oakland. He's had a pretty good career for the Raiders. And they've been consistent. You look at guys like Jason Hansen, who spent his whole career with the Lions and was a fairly early draft choice and, played for 20 years. And you never sweated, are you going to make this field goal or not? Tampa needs that. Sure, scouts like the fact that, or they want their input to matter the most. And the kickers, their input doesn't matter that much. So, yeah, worst trade ever. No, it was all right. I don't hate it. There's trades, definitely trades I hated worse in this year's draft.
How about Connor Cook, fourth round of the Raiders? That's a surprise.
Yeah, and I don't look at Connor Cook as an NFL starting quarterback, Paul. Do you?
I think he can play, yeah.
I look at him as a backup, and that's what Oakland needs. Oakland needs a backup. After the top three in the draft, and Lynch, I'm still iffy about Lynch, but after the 3 first-round guys, anybody who starts, any of the other, I think there was 11 other quarterbacks taken, or 12 other quarterbacks taken, any of them who plays any game time at all in 2016, it means that their team's screwed and the season's been a disaster. Connor Cook, he's a project. We'll see what he's worth 2 or 3 years.
I love Buffalo getting Ragland at 41. Braxton Miller goes to Houston in the 3rd round. I thought Tennessee taking Derrick Henry was stupid in the 2nd round when you sign Murray. That didn't make any sense. Jack falls to Jacksonville at 36. Good pick there. And I hated what Dallas did. We ripped them for taking a running back with the 4th overall pick. And then they took Jalen Smith, who's a nice story, and I hope he does well out of Notre Dame in the 2nd round. The kid's not going to play for a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, look, the bad organizations consistently do things that bad organizations do. Dallas has a billionaire owner as their GM. And therefore, the checks and balances aren't necessarily there when it comes to draft. And that's why the Cowboys haven't been to a Super Bowl since, 1994. Those are the moves that Dallas makes. And Cleveland, now they have this brilliant front office. Everyone loves Dave Podesta. Oh, my gosh, look at the Browns. They're brainiacs, All the Harvard guys are coming in. Did you see who they actually picked? Everyone loved the fact they got a whole bunch more picks. Did you see who they took with those picks?
So they took 5 wide receivers, I believe.
Yeah, they were. None of them are. I'm not convinced any of them are any good.
Yeah.
I'm really not. The Browns just did what the Browns do. Oh, I feel sorry for Cleveland fans. I really do. Let's talk about Miles Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, I was shocked. Number one, I was shocked that he dropped as far as he did. Number two, I was shocked that he wasn't like the first or second pick taken in the second round if someone didn't trade up to get him.
I agree.
That he falls to Jacksonville at 36. What do you think of that,
I
Paul?
think that's an excellent pick. I think that's a great pick.
Yeah, we're West Coast guys. We saw this guy play at UCLA, and he was an impact player in college, of course, if he ends up being a healthy pro.
Buffalo took Liston B in the 6th round, wide receiver out of TCU. He said he would have ran the fastest combine ever. He ran a 4.340 with a double hernia. How about that? And the Vikings, they took Boehringer, I think his name is, the first player out of the German Football League. The team was called the Unicorns. Sure. One coach said it's worse than Division III football, and the Vikings are saying, no, this kid's a steal. We got him. Watch, that could be something to follow.
Yeah, I was actually doing a little bit of reading on that, and is this a trend? Are we going to start to see European guys get drafted? It's going to be the NBA draft where all of a sudden, half the picks in the lottery you've never actually seen play or have any idea if they're any good or not. And this really seems like a one-outer. Very rare for a guy who doesn't play in the U.S. Or sometimes you see a guy from Canada. The U.S. does have international players from Canada. Certainly the Pacific Islands have a fair NFL contingent, but German wide receiver, more power to him. Good luck to you, kid.
All right, love it. All right, long show, setting a record here. Let's wrap it up. Money time, play of the day. Where are we going?
What do we got to do? We got the Cubs off a loss. The pick'em price range. They're 5-0 this year off a loss, and of course, for all the big names in Chicago, no one in baseball has done their job better than Hector Rondon so far. Through the month of April with a 0.00 ERA. Look at this stat, Pauly. A negative 0.37 FIP. His fielding independent pitching number is less than 0. How do you do that? 12 strikeouts, 2 hits, 0 walks. That's off the charts too. Meanwhile, that Pirates bullpen, they got 4 blown saves. They got 3 losses. They're bottom 10 in ERA. I know Cole's great. I don't care. Give me the Cubs in a pick'em price range off a loss. That's game number 951. Chicago Cubs and they're minus 105.
Beautiful. NFL, NBA playoffs, Kentucky Derby preview. All that coming up this week on SportsBit. Betting Insight today.